and the shot heard round the world was the start of the revolution. The Minutemen were ready on the move. Shot heard round the world. This is going to be the beginning of the American Revolution. The shot heard round the world. 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Lexington, Massachusetts. It's going to be a battle at Lexington and Concord and Lincoln and Minotomy, which is another Arlington now today, and then you have Cambridge. April 19th, 1775. April 19th, 1775. The end result of the battle is going to be 49 Americans are killed, 73 redcoat, lobster-tail devils have been killed. Why does this happen? Well, 1774, you had the Suffolk Resolves, which was a boycott of British goods. That was in a response to the 1774 Massachusetts Government Act, and that itself was in a response to the Boston Tea Party. So February 1775, George III declared that Massachusetts was in a state of rebellion. And then you have October 1774, Governor Gage is going to meet in Salem, and you're going to have the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. The Provincial Congress, the temporary Congress, is going to meet in Concord, October 7th, 1774. October 7th, 1774. What does that mean? That means during the Revolution from 1775 to 1778, they were ruled by the colonial charter, because they're going to kick out the governor, and then they're not going to have a governor, and then they're going to just be ruled by council, and then they're going to try to push for a constitution. 1778, the constitution is going to fail, and then 1780, the constitution is going to pass. And you had the Provincial Congress is going to meet in Concord. You're going to have John Hancock is going to be the president, and you're going to send Paul Revere to the First Continental Congress. They're going to declare that one of the 13 colonies has the first autonomous government. That was Massachusetts. I got a little blurb here I'm just going to read off, and then I have tactics. What were the tactics of the Revolutionary War heroes, the American revolutionaries? And the tactics are important, but tactics by itself can enable the fucking Nazi to be a better oppressor, can enable the Jewish folks to stand up and do something, you know. Tactics by itself doesn't help the oppressor or the oppressed. Anybody could use the tactics. So the tactics matter, but you can make the imperialists better with tactics, but then you could also make those who resist, the rebels, could have good tactics. The tactics by itself, if anything, you should just think of, if you got a plantation and let's say you have like 3 or 4 lines of security, you build a fence, you got a little dog, you got some guy that has an armed guard. Well, all those things do add a layer of security, but all those things can be overcome. And then think of Mariupol too. Think of Native Americans, or not Native Americans, but red ants. Red ants, they dig into the ground. So you might think you got rid of the red ant hill, but then they build another mound right over there. So it's push and pull, and it's ebbs and flows. What did what did that bastard say? Martin Niemöller, he says, at first they came for the communists, but I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for the trade unionist, and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And so that's German theologian, Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller. Good old Martin Niemöller. And so this little paragraph on April 14th, so this is 5 days before the shot heard around the world, Thomas Gage, the Commander-in-Chief, North America, Governor of Massachusetts, had received orders to take action against the Patriots. He decided to destroy the militia ordnance stored at Concord, Massachusetts. Remember, that's where the Provincial Congress, Massachusetts Provincial Congress, had met at Concord. And so where there was a skirmish at Lexington, their entire thing was to go to Concord. And then even though people want to say that it was an American victory, the British was able to go to Concord and destroy or take all the arms that was in Concord. But there was more body count, right? So the British had lost 70, 80, 73 red coat lobster tail devils had died and only 49 Americans. So in terms of body count, there was more killed on their part. And then they also withdrew. And then as they withdrew, they were being besieged on all sides as they marched back to Boston. So it's kind of pros and cons. I don't know if you could actually say it was an American victory. But they go to Concord, Massachusetts, and they were going to capture John Hancock and Samuel Adams. John Hancock and Samuel Adams. Remember Hancock, he signs his signature real big on the Declaration of Independence. And then Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams talks about a society. He talks about how you can join a society, withdraw from a society. He talks about natural rights, the rights of the colonists. Samuel Adams is going to be a dickhead with Shays' Rebellion, but before Shays' Rebellion, Samuel fucking Adams, John Hancock, these are the principal instigators of the rebellion in Massachusetts. The operation was to begin around midnight on April 19th in hope of completing it before the American patriots could respond. However, Paul Revere learned of the plan and notified Captain Parker, commander of the Concord militia, who prepared to resist. The first action of the war, commonly referred to as a shot heard round the world, was a brief skirmish at Lexington, followed by the full-scale battles of Lexington and Concord. British troops suffered around 300 casualties before withdrawing to Boston, which was then besieged by the militia. Now, I know that Lexington, Kentucky was named after Lexington, Massachusetts, but I wonder how many Lexingtons are there? There's probably a whole bunch of Lexingtons, right? Everybody's going to name themselves Lexington and Concord, especially since that's where the shot heard round the world had happened. So let's get on with it. The tactics. Okay, and so whenever you have warfare on unfavorable grounds, if there are no hills and there are no forests, you can't be like the swamp fox, Francis Marion. If you can't be like the swamp fox, hide behind the rocks and the hills and the forest, where it's just a bunch of plains and there's a whole bunch of mini roads. Well, there's a particular way that you got to fight that battle. If there are no places to hide, there's a bunch of roads and it's the plains where you're just out in the open. You don't really have a headquarters. You don't have any place to quarter. And so you would have to strike at night, right? At midnight is when they're going to attack. And then rapid strikes at night. You got to start at a point farthest away from your starting point, from the scene of action. So you have to start, remember, strike at night, do rapid strikes at night, start at a point farthest away from your little HQ. You can't really have, a permanent HQ, but you can't fight where the scene of the action is. And so that's why they're being besieged as they march back to Boston. Now, you can walk, they say 30 to 50 kilometers. I don't know, how many miles is 40 kilometers? 40 kilometers in miles. Well, that's 25 miles. So you could walk about 25 miles per night. So if you want to be a good Revolutionary War, hero, then you have to, you have to do your attacks at night, rapid strikes at night. Have to fight basically as a sort of pop and shot, right? It's pop and shock. You have to just get the stragglers. You can't go after the main body of the force. At nighttime, you can walk 25 miles, and you should do it in silence, in absolute silence. You can't be predictable. You got to vary your hours and your places and your forms of operations. You can't be predictable, so you got to vary the time and the place and the form of operation. You got to do a python strike, right? Just do a ricky-ticky-tabby, to go back to the python. You got to have a high degree of effectiveness. You have to be able to fight within a few minutes and then immediate withdrawal. You're not going to be able to fight as a Revolutionary War hero. You're not going to be able to take on the entire fucking army. So what you have to do is just pick them off. Pick off the stragglers, pick off the flanks, pick off the weak middle. And then once you have your python strike, then get the fuck up out of Dodge, right? Large quantities of automatic weapons. So these are just tactics in general. So the idea of a Revolutionary War hero is it's not about snipers. You're having to do things at nighttime, but it's the concentration of firepower at a short distance. And so with 10 to 15 people, the ideal is 5 to 10 people. But the concentration of firepower at a short distance is what you're aiming for, not so much a perfect marksman. But then I could see some good marksmen actually doing some good stuff too. If you have a concentration of firepower at a short distance, that means what? 15 guys are gathered right outside the garrison. Well, you could also have 15 guys just like sort of up on the mountains, on the mountaintops, and they could do some snipe shooting up there. But you want to get a large quantity of automatic weapons. You're going to need to use some mines in the roadways. You want to destroy bridges, destroy roadways. What was that? John Hunt Morgan was doing Morgan neckties, tearing up the telegraphs, tearing up communications, and destroying railroads. And they had a strong effect. So even though they weren't taking their armies and, taking major armies and clashing them together as a guerrilla force, because that's not the revolutionaries, that would be the anti-revolutionaries, but the tactics remain the same. You want small brigades, 10, 12, 15 is the max. If you get more than 15 in a brigade, then you're going to need to divide your forces. With 10, 12, 15 people, you can move basically anywhere, and you can do what you need to do, and you also have enough support for one another. So it's kind of the ideal is 5 to 10, 15 is max, but with a small brigade, that's the ideal way to fight on the plains. If you're going to be a revolutionary on the plains, you're going to need to be a runner. Like Hermes, like Mercury, you're going to have to just fly like the wind. Like Kajana Carter or Carl Lewis. Since you can't really have an HQ, and you don't want to get too comfortable, but maybe you could sleep someplace for 3 days, but you're going to have to hole up somewhere, and you're going to have to hole up in absolute secrecy. And so that's why it's good to move your encampment as frequently as possible. Remember, you got to vary your hours, your places, and forms of operation. You got to do rapid strikes at night, and you're going to want to start at a point farthest away from the starting spot, away from the scene of action. Ammunition is key. You're going to need some good socks too. You're going to have to learn how to probably mend your socks. And you're going to have to ride like the wind. Just run, Forrest, run. HQ or hole up in absolute secrecy. You want to be vigilant against rapid encirclement. And so if you're the American Revolutionary, you're afraid that the British redcoat, lobster-tailed devils are going to just, encircle you. And even if they don't annihilate you by encircling you, that really puts you at a disadvantage. You can't just, break free and then they could slowly but surely starve you out. When you have your 5 to 15 small brigades, you need to elect some formidable leaders because you got to have the consent of the governed. You want to have an army of individuals, but you're going to have some leaders, somebody coming up with the vision and coming up with the strategy and the tactics. Bazookas are a good weapon, and so are rifle grenades, but you can only really carry 3 shells. So the most effective thing is just to have your personal weapon of rapid fire. So you want your personal weapon of rapid fire. Back in the Revolution, I guess you just had those muskets. But the personal weapon of rapid fire is the best weapon to use. Bazooka and rifle grenades. You can only carry these for so long, and you can only carry 3 shells because they're heavy. And then some heavy weapons, like a tripod machine gun or a heavy 50 millimeter machine gun, you could take some of these weapons, but you got to have a willingness to give them up. So you're not going to try to take on the machine gun nest. You're not going to sit there and try to fight a big battle to hold on to the tripod machine gun or the heavy 50 millimeter machine gun. As long as you got your personal weapon of rapid fire, then you're good. You're golden. Now, there's also talk about having a zone. You got to have an important zone where you have peasants and small establishment. This little zone is where you could get your food and your bedding and your waterproof material. You can't rely on long supply lines nor long communication lines. Having long communication lines or long supply lines is dangerous. So if you do need anything, you can't procure anything, all the stuff you need for yourself, then have small establishments and businesses, small businesses and peasants. Food, bedding, waterproof material, mosquito nets, shoes, socks, medicine. You have to get those from the zone of the survival grounds, the survival goods. So you have to get your survival goods from the zone. When it came to the Viet Cong, the way that they got a lot of their weapons was to take guns and ammunition away from the enemy. So they would do the ambushes. They would, attack the vulnerable, attack the flanks, attack the rear end. So attack the remote. But you also, in the very beginning, what they would do with the Vietnamese, GIAP, the Viet Cong, they would take a small group of people that don't have any guns, maybe some crude shotgun, but just give them a couple spears, daggers, swords. So here's a couple of knives, here's a couple of swords. And the first operation, go get yourself some guns. And where you're going to get the guns? Well, you're going to take it from the empire. So they actually had a lot of good weapons after the long run. So the first fight was with not small arms, but with, knife. You're taking a knife to a gunfight. So the first fight is basically with knives, spears, daggers, swords. But then in the long run, the Viet Cong were able to get recoilless cannon and heavy mortars. They had really good machine guns and lots of submachine guns. And so that's what you want, right? Submachine guns. You want rapid fire, personal weapon of rapid fire, because that's the choice weapon of a revolutionary. When you have messages, oral messages is best, but as telephone, as you know, people can mess up a message. And then if you want to have written messages, you're going to have to learn to write in code, because we have to, right? There's going to be spies everywhere. Everybody's going to be... You can't get any large factories. You're not going to have a bunch of large factories just producing a whole bunch of uniforms and a whole bunch of guns. So what you're going to need is small shops to be able to recharge the shotgun shells and to make the simple grenades. So don't expect large factories. You're going to have small shops if you're going to need to make any of this stuff. Populous social areas. So it's real important for the revolutionary to win the hearts and minds of the people. So Valley Forge, right, the American revolutionaries were starving to death, and they were probably stealing all that food from the local people. But if they were giving them promissory notes and just saying, hey, we're out here fighting for the cause, you got to win the hearts and the minds of the people. And that's even Westmoreland. So that's the Viet Cong, that's the American revolutionaries in Vietnam. You had GIAP, right? GIAP was the smart general. But Westmoreland, which is the American general, he was talking about winning campaigns at the province, district, village, and hamlet levels. You got to win at the smallest unit, at the smallest town, at the smallest union or family. You got to win over the hamlets, all those little tiny buildings, and in the holler, you got to find any cluster of people. You got to win every individual house and every individual hamlet, village, district, and province over if you want to win the hearts and minds of the people. It's absolutely critical for the revolutionary to have popular support. If they don't believe in what you're doing, well then you're not really going to change much of anything at all. One good thing that the Americans did in us Americans did in Vietnam was when we did that, when we tried to win hearts and minds of the people, and we actually built infrastructure for our supporters. And so we would have water projects and canal projects and the like, which I think a lot of it still is around today. We're not just here to murder and pillage and rob and rape and kill all. No, we're here to actually help you out. And how are we going to help you out? We're going to build schools and roads and hospitals. We're going to win hearts and minds. We're not going to say, hey, we're just good. Just believe me. Hey, just believe me. So we talked about how if you need to depend on the peasants or the small establishments, you can't have large factories, you can't have long supply lines nor long communication lines. Populous social areas. It's kind of the opposite of what a revolutionary ought to be. You don't want to get too settled. Emerson said that as long as people aren't settled, is there any hope for the people? So maybe you could get like 3 days rest if you stay in the house. But that was John Hunt Morgan. That was his problem. John Hunt Morgan would just keep on staying with his wife or his lover or whatever, and then just spend weeks hanging out with his lover. He's like, man, I don't want to go back out there. And actually the rebels, the Confederates, you couldn't get a lot of them off their farms. So shit, having land reform would be good for the country, because if you love the farm so damn much, then you fall in love with farming that you're like, I don't even really want to fight for our racist, totalitarian bullshit system. So land reform is actually a good way to win people over. So maybe you get 3 days rest, but you're going to have to get back out there. The place for the revolutionary is out in the field. Francis Marion, he had learned, he had fought against the Cherokee. And when he fought against the Cherokee, I mean, they didn't fight, fair and square, a nice gentleman, Christian, one army is there, one army is there, then the two leaders talk and they try to work out an arrangement, and then you just clash all these armies and just have a mass of bloodshed. And to be honest, if you got 1,000 people, why would you just smash them up with another 1,000 people? Maybe if it's 1,000 people on 100, okay, that makes sense. That's a clash, but 1,000 versus 1,000, I don't know. That is that Sun Tzu? If you come across someone of equal or lesser strength, then you fight. If you come across somebody that is greater, then you flee and live to fight another day. But then Sun Tzu's also, you engage in a battle that you know you could definitely win. So 1,000 versus 100 is a battle that you could win. If you got 1,000 people, yeah, you could clash them against 100, or you could just, be a bunch of revolutionary guerrillas and just pick 100 off, one at a time, until that way you could have a perfect record, right? An absolute perfect record. Out of the 1,000 men you got, all 1,000 men return home, and all 100 of their guys do not. And then now what Patton said, it's you don't want to die for your country, you want the other poor dumb bastard to die for his. Man wants to die for country, oblige him. So if you have individual recalcitrant enemy soldiers, you're going to have to eliminate them without delay. You don't want any enemies in the zone. You don't want any enemies in your small little 5 to 15 brigade. I mean, to have prisoners of war, that doesn't make any sense in a revolutionary context, and really in a war context. War is hell, right? And so by having a prisoner of war, maybe you're trying to hold a couple hostages so you can... I mean, Palestine has, 100 hostages, but Israel has 9,000 political prisoners. And so, why don't you exchange 9,000 political prisoners for the 100? But hell, Hamas tried to do a negotiated settlement right from the get-go. All right, we'll give the hostages, just don't come into our land. No deal. No deal. We want to steal your fucking land. It has nothing to do with the damn hostages. We've been genociding it for the last 70 fucking years. Come on. Are you kidding me? So individual recalcitrant was a matter of necessity, right? It's not even a matter of no humanity. You're the enemy soldier. We came across you, and you want us to what? Just carry you around in fucking handcuffs, tie your hands with ropes, and just sort of carry you to and fro? I don't know, bruh. I don't know if that's... Sun Tzu says to be subtle. He says tactics is you need to collect your army and concentrate your forces. Again, if it's 1,000 versus 100, maybe 1,000 straight up against 100 would be better. But it just seems to me you could take 1,000 and circle them and then just sort of, take pop shots from each direction. So you could actually be the bigger army still doing these revolutionary Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox tactics. You know what Marion County is named after? Good old Swamp Fox. All the fighting that he had learned in the Cherokee, the war against the Cherokee, he used that as a war against the British. So some roads are not going to be used. This is Sun Tzu. Some armies are not going to be attacked. Some towns are not going to be besieged. Some positions are not going to be contested. And some commands of the sovereign are not going to be obeyed. So that's interesting, right? If you're in the plains, you're not going to use all the roads. Sometimes you're going to just be like, okay, that road is taken over. That place is, I'm not even going to contest that. He's got that position up there. He's got a nice little hornet's nest up there. It makes me think of the Helmand province in Afghanistan. Why not just let them have that? Take over the rest of the fucking country and do really well with the rest of the fucking country. But it's like each commander kept coming in and saying, nope, we need to go to Helmand. No, we got to fight Helmand. No, we got to go in the hornet's nest. And we're not going to win this thing unless we take over the hornet's nest. Let them have the hornet's nest. and then fight, peripherally. And maybe if you win the rest of the country, then maybe you could take on the Hornet's Nest. Or maybe Afghanistan will just be a tiny little country, and then you'll have some other country that's bigger, than Afghanistan. Greater Afghanistan. Maybe that could be the new Israel. I don't know. We should rejoice in the truth. Jesus said, speak the truth, and the truth shall set you free. When people speak, they should be a conduit for the Holy Spirit, for the great Holy Spirit of ultimate goodness, the great Holy Spirit of utilitarian goodness. Utilitarian goodness, because why are you getting power? You want money and power just for your fucking self so you can lord it over the rest of us? That doesn't inspire me. That don't move me at all. We don't need a balance between good and evil. We don't need one fucking jackass to take every fucking thing. We don't need a Gilgamesh sitting there raping all of our damn wives. Gilgamesh, why you want to rape all of our wives? Because I want all the pussy. Okay, I can see how that's good for you. But that's the autocrat. That's a dictatorship. That's totalitarianism. Utilitarian is what is best for the many is what's best. And the Great Spirit wants what's best for the great many of the people. Ephesians says that fathers should not provoke their children to wrath. The testimony, when you speak from the Spirit, you should speak from your heart. You should say what your conscience is saying. Emma Goldman just says, public speaking is easy because you get on your platform and then you just say what comes to you. Say what comes to you and what makes sense. And make sure you speak with simplicity and God-like sincerity. Be sincere, goddammit. Make it simple, goddammit. Sun Tzu says you need to use stratagem where you can, and then in desperate situations, fight. Use stratagem where you can, and in desperate situations, you got to fight. A typical attack for a regular army is you travel to the battle site, then you have an encampment, and then you attack. Well, Jun Kidu says to attack before the attack, right? Intercept and fist. So right before they go to punch, you punch right then and there. And so by always trying to attack them right before they do the attack, well, they travel, then there's the encampment, and then there's the attack. You could stop the travel. You could be an intercept and fist for the travel. They don't even nip it in the bud. They don't even get on the damn road. You can nip it in the bud when they encamp. When they encamp, know that you still got a minute. And then when they come for the attack, right, you still got that 1 second. Sun Tzu says it's important to have speed, surprise, and deception. The essentials of the attack is to have speed, surprise, and deception. So you have an uproar in the east, and then you strike in the west. Have an uproar in the east and strike in the west. You have the distraction. You have the fake bank robbery that's being called, and then you take the munitions. Uproar in the east, strike in the west. Now, bull seals, they survive from their fat necks. A bull seal will survive from their fat necks. So sometimes if you got a 3 days rest, get yourself fat. With your fat, you can, the bull seal can survive for 10 days. The boy who cries wolf, if you become known as a pathological compulsive liar, liars are not believed even when they're telling the truth. So that doesn't bode well for the president. Hey, you're a consistent pathological compulsive liar. We don't know what the fuck is going to... Is that true? Is it not true? Who the fuck knows? Who the fuck cares, right? The hen and the cat, this is Aesop's fable. Uninvited guests are most welcome when they leave. The hen was sick and the cat was like inquisitive. What's wrong, hen? Are you sick? Are you okay? Hey, I'll be all right, cat. Why don't you just get on home and then I'll get well on my own accord, okay? I'm sure you're not going to help me. Fucking cat asking it. And then the frogs who wanted a king, Jupiter throws them a log. There's your king. And the frogs at first are like, what is this? What is this log? And then they got pissed off. They're like, come on, Jupiter, the god, Zeus. The one true God, Allah, Jehovah, Yeshua. And then Jupiter gave them a stork, and the stork just one by one would eat them up. Well, shit, is that what you wanted, frogs, huh? Why didn't you elect one of yourselves? You could lead yourselves. You're going to be led by a log, right? Are you that stupid? If you're not that smart, then maybe you need some intelligent frog. You ask Jupiter, and then he give you a stork, so that's your god, but your god is just randomly picking you off one by one. So now you're not going to be organized at all. The moral of that Aesop fable is let well enough alone. If things are good, leave it alone. So Westmoreland, even, the Americans in Vietnam, we knew better. We knew what we should be doing. But you got a bunch of empty suits that's like, yeah, maybe we should strike. Yeah, let's do massive bombardments all over the damn place against the shadow. How are you going to attack the shadow by having big-ass fucking uproar in the east, strike in the west? Giap says you got to have your ambushes and remote attacks. No hills, strike at night, rapid strikes at night. Learn to be a runner. You don't want to take too big of heavy weapons. Just take your personal weapon of rapid fire. That's the revolutionary gun of choice. You may need to depend on peasants and small establishments, but you shouldn't get dependent upon it. Bazookas and rifle grenades can be effective, but you can only carry 3 shells. When you're using ammunition, make sure you have the idea of when you go in, you're going to get the ammunition that is used. Make sure you replenish whatever ammunition you have. Ammunition is absolutely key for the revolutionary. All right? All right.